Hi, welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. For this week's episode, I went to London to sit down with Saul Dibb, a writer and director whose films include Bullet Boy, The Duchess, and Sweet Française. His latest feature, Journey's End, an unconventional World War I drama starring Asa Butterfield, Sam Claflin, Paul Bettany, Stephen Graham, and Toby Jones as soldiers in the trenches of France in spring 1918, is in theaters right now, and it's very good. Saul picked A Prophet, Jacques Audiard's magnificently complex 2009 prison drama starring Tahar Rahim as a young man named Malik who's facing 6 years in a French prison for an unspecified crime. With no friends on the inside and precious few on the outside, Malik looks like he's being set up to be destroyed, except that he's smart and he's watchful, and when a Corsican mobster played by Niels Arstrup makes him an offer, he's ready to make the most of it. It's a tense, powerful film that refuses to just be one thing, and if you haven't seen it, well, go see it and then listen to the rest of the episode. It's very good. This is Someone Else's Movie.
You know, I just love it on so many different levels. I've always been a massive fan of Jacques Audiard's work. I think he's an incredible filmmaker, and I'd love The Beat That My Heart Skipped, and I'd love to Read My Lips even, and that was, you know, you could see his kind of, the way he was growing as a filmmaker through those films. And then I just thought A Prophet was a kind of masterpiece, really. Of a year that produced two, I thought, European masterpieces. There was The White Ribbon in its own way, which was just flawless, I felt. And then there was A Prophet, which was completely different.
Yeah.
And they both went up, I think, for the Best Picture Oscar.
They did.
Cancelled each other out, and I can't remember which other, and something else won.
Yeah. It was, I pulled up my review just to double check to make sure, because I remember not expecting to like it as much as I did.
Yeah.
If that's not too judgy from a critic's perspective. Yeah. But it's, you know, everybody was saying, oh, the prison movie. And it's like, well, it's a prison movie the same way that Godfather is a mob movie. It's just...
Exactly. He transcends I think that's what he does so brilliantly. And so I saw it, for me, for the first time, without any baggage.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it at the London Film Festival, so it had not been reviewed yet, and it just came, and it was, I think, the surprise film maybe that they'd had there, and I just thought it was amazing, and I loved the fact that he took a kind of genre, clearly a genre, you know, it's kind of rags to riches crime story, a kind of Scarface, and totally reinvented it, you know, very cinematic in a claustrophobic environment. But he did, for me, the one kind of brilliant thing was just to put in a French Arab actor in the middle of it. So, and he talked about it afterwards. I read him, you know, what he'd said about it, and it said it was a way to create a new icon. You know, what you can do with genre films is you can put a hero in the middle of it, who conforms in a way to some kind of archetypes, but out of it you create a whole new icon, which I think, you know, Three Billboards in a way has probably done this year, to create a kind of female character who's a bit like a kind of Western character who won't give up, and then you've got this, you know, this gang kingpin who starts as a blank page kid. So so I was kind of blown away with it.
Yeah, and the fact that he is his ethnicity immediately sets him aside from any of the other gangs. He's not part of anything.
No, because he comes, you know, again, just really clever decisions there. He comes as I think he's an orphan, isn't he? Or his parents are not around.
Yeah, they're out of the picture. Anyway.
He's been, he's been children's home stuff. So he doesn't have a past. He doesn't have a culture, and he grows and develops one. He doesn't have an identity. You know, he's not. You know, he doesn't belong to any kind of religion. He doesn't belong to any group. And that's what's interesting about him. He's in between all of these different gangs. And you know, and eventually he ends up with a strong identity and just makes a decision about who he goes with. But all of those things are to play for at the start of the film. We don't even know really what he's done. You know. Yeah, he's hit some policemen. He's got 6 years. and he's a kind of boy thrown into a man's world.
And Tahar Rahim is he's so still and watchful that it took me, it really wasn't until the second viewing that I started to have an opinion on whether he was watchful or frightened.
Yeah,
you can't
absolutely.
read him at all.
No, absolutely. And so that's why he fitted in. And so many of the scenes, he, kind of dominates the scenes, but he's observing them, and he brilliantly learns to speak. He understands the Corsican dialects that they're speaking, and so he begins to understand what they're saying, and so he becomes the eyes and ears. So it has all of that, and then on top of that has all of the formal inventions that I think he puts on, and then on top of that has this totally unexpected metaphysical layer as well, which means that it completely transcends any ordinary kind of, in a way, either social realist, it's a very real feeling film, or kind of gangsterish film. He takes it onto a kind of poetic level. Yeah,
the longer the film goes, the bigger it gets.
Yes,
and not
exactly.
necessarily through narrative, it just expands.
Yeah, exactly. The themes get bigger and bigger, and what's at stake gets bigger and bigger. But also the sense of that as a piece of cinema, as its own thing, just grows in pace. And I thought, the way he the director dealt with the metaphysical element of it was just embedded so heavily in the reality and in his guilt and conscience that it was just seamless, and the visual effects were just brilliant, the light that comes at the end of the thumb, and all of that stuff just obviously added in with Desplat's score. Just everything was working together to create something I thought that was pretty spectacular.
Yeah, and it won't be one thing for any given time. It refuses to conform. It sets itself up. It establishes all the rules of the prison film, and then it just starts to violate them.
And then starts to and then actually it becomes less about the kind of plot, and it does just it has the whole cancer thing, and and it just seems to me it seems to really speak about that relationship between European cinema and North American cinema. Mm-hmm. So, even Godard and the French New Wave were referring to the kind of gangster films of the 30s and 40s. American is steeped in that,
noir films.
And then the American New Wave in the 70s borrows from the French New Wave, and starts changing completely the way it makes all its, particularly its crime-based stuff. Mm-hmm. Or just the European filmmaking sensibility that was in a lot of Francis Coppola's work, or in Parallax View, or all of those things, and then it goes back over the pond, back to Jacques Audiard, who's clearly in love with that kind of side of American cinema. And it just seems like that's just such a great to and froing of it's where it really works. I think all of those different influences and approaches.
Yeah, I mean, it's in conversation with 50 years of cinema history.
Yeah, exactly.
From, I guess it would go from White Heat to Breathless to Bonnie and Clyde to the argument in the 70s with the British New Wave of Get Carter and things like that.
Yeah, British New Wave, absolutely, and all of that kind of neorealism, and and how that gave an injection back into, in a way, kind of genre films or gangster films.
And here we are with this ostensible prison picture, which it sets its rules out. It tells you what it's going to be, and then it just refuses to be that thing.
Yes.
And I mean, it doesn't even make it as a prison film for the entire length. It leaves. It goes outside.
It goes and leaves because it also embraces what the truth of prison life. Mm-hmm. Just get a day release.
Yeah.
That's what I don't know whether that's true in Canada or the United States, but
probably furlough programs.
That's how it works. It worked that brilliantly into the narrative, but it keeps you stuck, claustrophobic. Mm-hmm. The pressure cooker thing at the beginning until it bursts out, and he has, I guess that kind of metaphysical thing. It isn't just with the guy he's murdered and how he comes back. It's with that crazy incident with a deer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's with that incredible slow motion sequence when everyone's getting shot and the bullets all around him, and he emerges unscathed. You know, which relates then to this kind of sense of being a prophet.
Yeah. I spent the entire film wondering what the title meant.
Yeah, and I think still it's a bit of a mystery too. You know.
Yeah. What is he a prophet of exactly?
Of exactly, and and he's still a kind of enigma, I think, when he steps outside.
Right, and that's it, isn't it? I mean, you wouldn't, if you were watching a modern religious parable, I've always kind of wondered about this, would we understand it if it was happening in our contemporary milieu? Would we know, would 21st century Western culture recognize a religious experience if it was happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if it happens in that world, you know, because we're also conditioned to write off criminals or criminality or this, you know, to not allow particularly like a kind of underclass of people any spirituality either. So, but obviously, you know, true to the kind of original stories, that's where it would be happening. Right? It would be happening on the streets. It would be happening in people who are living very, very difficult, complex lives.
Yeah, Christ hung out with beggars and sex workers. And
no, absolutely.
People would rather not think about that, especially in America right now. But
no, exactly, and that's the, you know, that's the origins of it. So you're right. And where would it come from? And also, you know, it's a political film as well. I think it doesn't wear the politics on its sleeve, but you know, prisons are. It's about opportunities, isn't it? Where would we all be? Were we, which I think film does brilliantly. You know, if we were to be in his shoes with his background, what would we do in that situation? Where would we go?
Yeah. Would we? Well, the first moral test of the film is: can you kill someone to make your life a little easier?
Yeah.
You know, are you willing to do that?
Well, I guess to save your life. I mean, that's kind of how they set it up, isn't it? You know, we will kill you if you don't kill him, kind of thing. And that's just, I mean, that just grips you, doesn't it? And it's like, 10 minutes into the film or something, he hears about that. And Niels Austrup is just such a brilliant, malevolent figure in that, you know.
It's that forehead.
Yeah, it's that
just,
forehead.
I mean, that's what formidable means. I think. He's just, pushes into the frame, and you're afraid of him. You feel
looking like kind of slightly like Klaus Kinski, you know.
Yeah.
But it's the intensity, and you really feel. I mean, you know, and the brilliant details. You know, he heats up a spoon, and you don't know why he's heating up. Then he presses it on his eye. Yeah. All the kind of brilliantly and awfully ingenious things people do in prisons to turn normal things into weapons. You know.
No, the world is lived in a way that
it's really lived in.
The details are specific in a way that you just you start to cringe from thinking about what something would mean.
Absolutely, where so you believe it completely. And I think a lot of times when you see films, I certainly watch a lot of films, and I just think, I just don't believe it. Yeah. I don't feel that they've done their work to understand what that world, how that world is. And I just felt that that Audiard had just got to grips with the details so brilliantly, and he'd obviously brought in a lot of ex-prisoners to be in the background supporting artists, so they knew how to move. It was, it didn't feel any of it was faked.
Yeah, it's a weird line too when you're working in that sort of slightly stylized, just removed from reality kind of world, where you don't want to cue the audience too much that this is an unrealistic depiction.
No,
but you want to make it. You want to set something apart from reality just enough to make it cinematic, without making it feel fake, right?
Yes.
That's because we can always tell.
We can always tell, and or to feel mundane, and everyday, which can be, it certainly can be a type of cinema that's very, very powerful.
Sure,
but you're right, he's going for a kind of heightened sense of reality in a very operatic kind of storyline. But I think he does it right from the start.
Yeah.
Even when you see the titles are kind of, You know, they're kind of darkness is encroaching around the titles. You already feel like I'm in the hands of somebody who's going to be doing something to the ordinary. And then it's all about point of view, which is, it's like that old irising technique in films, you know, but it's blurred around the edges. So you very strongly get a sense of point of view in the film. You know, this is some person's very subjective point of view. And the frame is only showing you a fragment of the whole image. And so he's already doing something visually, a thing that's telling you this is different. This is heightened. This is very, very real. And like you say, it's all very, very lived in, but it's a kind of heightened sense of that reality.
Yeah, and it makes us look more closely at everyone and consider things. Just trying to figure out what people want becomes an incredible challenge. Not what do they want you to do? That's pretty obvious, but the reasons behind the reasons.
Yes.
We never fully understand him. He wants power. Gradually it's revealed, spoilers. Yeah. He wants to run things, but I don't know that he wants that going in. I don't know that was ever a goal. No,
I don't think so. I think and then it becomes an interesting question what that kind of represents.
Yeah.
You know, what's he saying?
Is it just survival?
With that? Because that's also very unusual as a piece of writing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what is the thing that makes him want that power?
Yeah.
You know, because there's lots of other things that go with it, like education and reading and learning, that don't necessarily mean that you're going to end up doing that. But I guess what it follows is a kind of it's like a master-servant relationship, isn't it? Father-son, master-servant, you know.
Yeah.
So he's being mentored by
Airstrip's character.
Yeah, all the way through, and obviously, you know, as it always happens, there'll be a point where he has to throw off his master and take over. So maybe it's adhering to that, but it feels so organic. It does have all the genre elements, but you're never feeling like they're cranking through the gears.
Yeah. My second time through, I was trying to figure out if he was being led or if he was leading, if he was trying to create this relationship. If there's any clue in the film.
Because a lot of it seems to be kind of luck as well, but maybe that's partly also where the prophet thing comes in. There's a light kind of shining on him somehow.
Yeah.
Or
the circumstances have aligned for this reason.
Yeah. And I think also, you know, it's about, for me, watching, it's about people's options. You know, when you're in that environment, what other options are you being given? You know, and there's a great phrase, I think, that somebody said that crime is a left-handed form of capitalism. You know, so he's really just doing what any kind of good, you know, go-getting capitalist would do, which is work up through the system that you find yourself in,
right,
with a will to power to get to the top.
Sure.
You know, and use your entrepreneurial skills to rip other people off and, you know, cut out the middleman, knock off other people, you know, and do what's necessary. Because again, it's power, and, you know, violence is a language, and it works in that environment.
Yeah.
It creates power.
And it also, rather, maybe it doesn't create, but it allows the interpretation of the metaphor of, you know, the dark-skinned men coming into France and taking all the good jobs. That sort of thing. I loved that the film never explicitly makes that felt. It's just there. It's just floating freely in France in 2009. Everything is just sort of.
And also France, I think, is you know, I'm not French, but you kind of see what's going on in France. I don't think it, you know, it doesn't have a good relationship with its Muslim population, you know.
Not 10 years ago, I think it was probably worse.
It was probably worse, you know. It feels like it's still negotiating. Well, I mean, I guess all the terrorist stuff, homegrown terrorist stuff since has also complicated that. But, you know, the riots that were on the streets of Paris, all the stuff that Lane came out of as well, you know, before. And so it's very brave, I think, to also just to take an unknown and make that your story on a film that's I imagine probably the most expensive film that he'd made up until then.
For him, certainly, yeah.
So it's just got all of that stuff going on, and it's brilliantly told as well. I thought it seems no surprise. What's interesting that his dad was a screenwriter, so he was obviously brought up in that kind of thing. But the way he writes is not as a normal, kind of Hollywood or Western kind of 3-act structure model.
Yeah.
It's much more complicated, and many more things are withheld. Information's withheld. As I think you talked about when he first arrives, you don't really know much about him. It doesn't lay everything out for you about what you're going to expect.
Yeah, I mean, the only way that it's a conventional prison film in that way is that there has never been a single prison film where someone goes in to do their time quietly and succeeds.
Right, yeah.
I love that there's someday someone will make one and we'll understand why they don't make them. But he's just immediately, he's going to keep his head down, he's not going to bother anyone, no one's going to bother him.
Yeah.
And of course, the illusion of control in a penitentiary, it's doubly so. There's absolutely no way to keep himself isolated. And every single, it's like a pinball machine. Every single piece is in rotation around him.
Yes.
And that first act of choosing an allegiance or doing whatever it takes to be safe leads us all the way through. I mean, that's that if anything is the inciting incident that every screenwriter lives for.
Yes.
But it seems so
it's
natural.
Survival. Yes.
Yeah. It's the thing that, of course, you would do that. Of course, you would. I mean, you're so quickly we're on the side of this criminal, whoever he is, whatever he's done.
Yeah.
And I think not knowing anything just makes it perfect. We can imprint ourselves on him, or build empathy, and maybe.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And was even the crime? Was it a resisting arrest
exactly,
thing? They get in a fight. What was the thing? So he's left that interestingly open. I mean, funnily enough, I was just thinking, going back to what it is he wants. I mean, to me, the closest it's less a prison film. It's more like a remake of Scarface.
Mm-hmm.
So he arrives, doesn't he? I haven't seen it for a while, but I don't think Al Pacino arrives thinking. Well, obviously, I'm talking about Scarface.
Sure.
Mark II. Arrives.
Well, he's one of the Marielitos, so I think
Yes.
it's implied that he was already a criminal.
Oh, okay. One of the kind of
'cause he has the
all the ones that
scar
are pushed out. Yes. He just sees. But I guess what he just sees is opportunity,
Right.
doesn't he?
Yes.
It's partly the American dream, is what that's
Yes.
is working way through the ranks. But I think what I kind of find interesting about A Prophet is at the end, it doesn't have the moral coda, which is always like the gangster dies, the gangster falls from grace, the gangster goes to prison, or in Goodfellas, the gangster turns against his own people. Here, it's like the end shot. It's so triumphant.
Yeah.
It's just about power. He's walking down the road with, and a load of cars and SUVs start trailing him down the road, which is actually, really provocative.
No, it's a great
thing to say at the end, and just tells you, I think, whether what side the director's on.
Yeah.
The champion of that underdog who's got himself into this situation.
Yeah, and it's not a tragic victory the way, say, The Godfather is.
Yeah.
With Michael Corleone being anointed.
Yes.
At the cost of everything.
At the cost of his soul.
Yeah.
Because this guy's kept his soul.
He's
actually got more of a soul, as he's gone on.
Yeah, we certainly we know him better.
Yeah, and he makes great friends with the guy. He gets cancer, he dies. He's going to take on their family.
Mm-hmm.
He's taken on. He's found a faith or an identity of sorts.
Yeah.
And then leaves, and you think, wow, what's he going to do now?
Yeah, whatever's next is completely unknown. Again, I mean, you could pick up another film 10 years later with him arriving somewhere new.
Yes.
And it would be, I think, now I want to see that. It would be just as interesting to see where this character is now.
Yes.
Because Audiard has this clarity in his storytelling, even when he's tarting it up with visual, well, tarting it sounds derogatory, but when he's
visual flourishes.
Yeah, when he's doing the things that make his films
Yeah.
so distinctive, he still he never strays from his points. He tells a story in a straight line.
Yeah.
He allows the room to contemplate the meaning of things, but there's also a clear explanation for everything that we see.
Yes.
And why people do the things they do. It's just about getting us to the places where we can understand how this is happening.
Yeah.
I suppose. I mean, I've always been fascinated that he would choose to remake Fingers so early in his career.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such an odd choice.
And, well, I know. And then, and it's so brilliant. And then you watch Fingers. And I went to watch Fingers after seeing The People Who Skipped. And I was like, wow.
Yeah, they're very different films.
They're so different. One really works and one for me works not quite so well.
Mm-hmm. Well,
I know.
The Toback film didn't really work in the 80s either. And I think everybody was really impressed at the attempt.
Yes.
So it was
the idea of marrying these two things. But, that was just...
No, it's a mess.
But The Beat That My Heart Skipped was just brilliant.
Yeah, it's a surgical version of that film. It finds the through line and it removes all the excess, the stuff that Toback always does, where he just falls in love with his own writing and can't cut. Yeah.
Whereas actually, it's not the dialogue you remember from it. It's the encounters, the intensity of Romain Dury, who was, I think, was like did a lot of French comedies before it.
Yeah, I still don't understand that. I've only ever seen him in dramas, and
it was just brilliant. But the electricity, the intensity.
Yeah, he's got
this restless soul.
A profile for drama and a jaw for thrillers. I just don't see him doing comedies.
Yeah, and just so intense and magnetic, but really difficult to pull off. The gangster pianist. It's like it's really, but he does it. But I think just with such kind of straight line. But I think there was something else in his methodology that I really liked, and would love to be able to incorporate in any films that I did. Is he does this thing called an A? You probably know, but he does a thing called an A roll and a B roll.
Oh, shooting multiple cameras.
No, it's because he shoots a single camera.
Okay.
But he shoots. I think this is what he calls it. But essentially, it's like A is the script, right? And then he finds time to shoot B. B are kind of improvised moments or scenes or stuff.
So shooting
experiments around it.
Intentions of the script.
And I think you can see that when you see the films, because you can see so much more of the world than is just in a script.
Yeah.
So in the start, I think, of Beat That My Heart Skipped, I think the opening scene, and I might be wrong, but I think it is one of the improvised scenes. Which is just about somebody telling a story about his dad, what his dad was like. Cut to them in the underpass, music's on, they're going off to do some dastardly kind of stuff. But it's just a brilliant way to kind of encapsulate the whole story, really, about fathers.
And I thought it was just a way of differentiating it out of the gate from the Toback film, because it just opens so differently that you're instantly set back trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I think so. I really like the idea that he kind of start improvising around your script, and then bringing the two together is, a really nice thing. I've tried, first film I ever did was improvised, and then went into things that were more scripted. But I've always tried to keep that element of improvisation because it just gives you a layer of reality.
Yeah. How are you? How are you with people just going off script within a scene? Does it lend itself to that?
No, I think it doesn't. I don't know. I think you really need to work out what it is that you're doing that for.
Yeah.
Little bits and pieces, obviously, but I much prefer to be collaborative with the actors and try and work out what might be wrong with the scene, rather than kind of correct it mid-scene by going off and doing something else.
Yeah, there are times when you can tell in a film where someone has just fired off on their own.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works, occasionally. Christopher Walken or Nicolas Cage, Michael Shannon. There are people who can do it and invest a moment with their own particular eccentricity. Yeah. But you're also really, really aware that they're doing it.
Exactly, and I think there are brilliant sequences like Taxi Driver, the classic. Are you talking to me? That was a lot of kind of different improvised takes from what I understand. Put together. Suddenly it's a whole new sequence.
But it's orchestrated. Right?
Yeah, but it's
not a
orchestrated.
violation of the scene when it happens.
And it's totally, it has to be actor in tandem with director for that stuff to really work, I think.
Yeah, and certainly Prophet, there's just, it's so controlled and so tense.
Yeah.
That, I mean, I'd love to know which scenes are which, because there's so much life in the film.
Yes, and when you see, I think sometimes also you see, he goes into like a Nas track, I think. It's just like a big hip hop track goes in the middle, and he does a long kind of montage sequence.
Oh, yeah.
Which involves some of the people just looking straight at camera. It's completely just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Seemingly, even just also the intertitles he uses. Which clearly there's a big nod to Scorsese.
Yeah, the chapter
in
endings.
there, but done in a way that feels different. I think he even puts up eyes and ears, doesn't he, on screen?
So, yeah.
He says, "You're going to be my eyes and ears," and flashes up eyes and ears.
Yeah.
It just felt like it was just so bold and confident. And I think when you watch a film, you want to feel that whoever's steering the ship knows exactly where they want to be taking you with it, and you feel that completely.
Yeah, it's the thing that people talk about when they talk about Tarantino, the authorial stamp.
Right.
But Audiard just does it in such a completely different way.
Yeah.
That there's no point in comparing the two. It's simply that they're both in command of the form.
Yeah.
To the point where they can do that.
Yeah, and it's absolutely what they want to, how they want to do it. And look, obviously lots of people, lots of directors who do that, and that's in a way part of being a director.
Yes.
is being able to do that. But it's playful, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
That's what, it feels like it's not just a kind of, it can be kind of a look at me kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I think he's much more interested in us looking at them.
Yeah, it always feels to me when it's done properly, it's just an acknowledgement of the possibilities of the form.
Yes.
Look at, this is a movie. We don't have to be 100%
We can do that.
realistic.
We all know we're watching a movie, but it doesn't stop your suspension of disbelief. It doesn't stop you looking, caring, following this person.
Right. No, if anything, it pulls you in closer. Wes Anderson somehow does that too. That was somebody I was thinking. I just saw Isle of Dogs a couple of weeks ago, and
oh yeah, I can't wait to see that.
It's great. It's just great. And I was struck with his, how stop motion, just it frees him in a way that's starting to corrupt his live action stuff, but not in a bad way. But Grand Budapest Hotel could have only happened after he made Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Right.
Just treating
framing,
treating films as play sets, and every element is designed and bespoke. It's like it brought him into a proper understanding of the thing he was already doing.
Yes.
And then you look at Isle of Dogs, and it's the same again. The strengths of Grand Budapest have now gone back into stop motion because he's aware that everything in the film is constructed, but he's created this near future Japanese megacity with garbage made out of cotton wool and things, and it's exquisite, but it's that instinctive understanding of what's possible to tell his story. And that, strangely enough, brings me back to Audiard, because he hasn't made two films that are the same, and he's not repeating himself. Deepan is very different again. And somehow each one of them, the only thing that's in common with the next or the last is that they're his films. That they were made by this same guiding intelligence, that there's a vision behind them.
Have you seen the most recent one?
No, I haven't. I've only seen Deepan. Is there
one? Oh yes. Well, he's just done the Sisters Brothers.
No,
which is the first American film. Is it Western?
Is it going to Cannes? Or?
I don't know. I think I just heard that it must be finished soon.
Okay.
Well, Deepan's an interesting one because you're right. Again, and formally it's different.
Yeah, I mean, you could maybe make a comparison. They're both about structured systems that are infiltrated by people.
An outsider, yes.
But that's really the extent of it, and you can say that about almost any film.
Yes.
Because they're all about singular personalities becoming the focus.
And also about, at the time, complete unknowns. Even more with Deepan,
That's true.
That, you didn't even feel particularly like they're actors, and so unlike the the two leads, that you would ever find in, in a film.
In a conventional
film, yeah. But with also that big, slightly strange kind of gangster narrative that goes underneath it too.
Yeah. I feel like he's open to the possibilities of telling stories. Starting, I guess they're also both marginalized characters. He starts with that. But his sympathies are such that he'll tell the stories of people we probably wouldn't pay attention to in a glossier film.
Yeah, yeah.
They'd be the secondary character rather than the lead.
Or people we might not obviously like.
Sure.
I mean, Beat the My Askett, he does some not very nice things,
Although we're much more used to sympathizing with white gangsters.
Yeah, we are.
Right, cinematically.
Yes.
There's a history there.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's true, and find them all, they're like kind of cheeky bad boy kind of thing.
But I guess too, that's early enough in his filmography that he wouldn't be, he'll try something safer just so he can make the next film, that kind of thing.
Yes. So I guess you leapfrog it. So you do Rust and Bone, which I thought was great as well. Matthias Schoenaerts and
Kochiar.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, that one was. I think that's probably still his most divisive film. I saw it at TIFF at a press screening. It was one of the P&I industry screenings, 400 people.
Yeah,
and I think precisely half the room rejected it, and it was a really fascinating experience. Because I'm just sitting there thinking, all right, let's keep going. What do you got? This is not. I mean, it's not a conventional love story, which is fascinating.
Yeah,
and I like these actors. And you could just feel other people just not get it.
It wasn't, yeah. I mean, I think it's very underrated. I still really love it. But it's not as satisfying of an experience in a way. And maybe that sometimes it's not. People might want something more whole at the end. You don't really get a sense of whether they're together. I mean, it is kind of a love story, and they do fall in love. But it's also...
Well, it's about recovery and escape and all of the other things.
And all of those things,
It's funny. It's I guess it's probably the hardest one to quantify, just to say what kind of film it is.
Yeah.
It's about damaged people.
Yes.
But again, so is everything.
Yes.
And it doesn't have the high of the final shot of A Prophet where you just...
you see them together. You want them, you desperately want to see them together as a family, don't you?
Yeah.
For the sake of this, or for the sake of the kid, or all of those things that you've come to care about.
Yeah. They've earned it.
Yeah, but he doesn't quite. He doesn't quite give it to you there. I think also. I mean, what I really love is that he and The Prophet's a great example. I think. He makes contemporary films, He makes contemporary films in France that travel internationally.
Yeah.
And as a British director who started off, my first film was a contemporary film, very contemporary film, and then, having made period films, I'm always trying to kind of get back to making things that say something about contemporary Britain, and you're swimming against the international tide. Who is interested in Britain for what we used to be and not for what we are.
Yeah. Well, it's
very difficult. So to make something has to be so good, particularly French, to break out and become an international hit in the way that A Prophet was.
Yeah, but what you're saying about British cinema is fascinating, because we are at a place where we've had 3 Churchill films in the space of a year and a half, and Journey's End is about World War One, but there is, I think, a constant conversation about, as you say, what Britain used to be as a spirit representing to the world, and just to see all the different treatments of the past now. You've got Frears' film about Victoria and Abdul, and that sort of engagement in an adorable way with colonialism. It feels like that the English film industry is at a place now where it's capable of confronting the past. If it wants to. Yes,
and it does. And because if you make period films, it doesn't make them innately conservative. Although a lot of the most successful ones often are, because they
don't challenge the audience.
No, and they perpetuate a kind of they can give us a reassuring myth about ourselves.
Sure.
Which, we've seen probably quite a few of those recently.
Yeah. Sure.
Or ones that actually I think really intelligently look at kind of complex social history, but they're still part of a global brand, Britain, like The Crown, which is really brilliantly written and deals with a lot of kind of dark stuff about what the establishment was up to and all of that, those kinds of things. But it's still, that's still the big Netflix series, isn't it? It's not that from Britain. It's not something else. So that's I always think that you can look to Europe, France mostly. I think feels like was with Lehane and it is with Audiard to kind of embrace more of what's going on.
And sort of look into its current contradictions.
Yeah.
Without the gloss, without the veneer of period or disguise.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one of the things about the Canadian film industry that fascinates me. We just haven't had one long enough that we have a myth.
Right.
We don't have a mythology. Right. So, we made a Norman Bethune film in 1980. That was it. And
You've been around for a bit longer than that.
Documentaries, sure, but in terms of features, there really haven't been that many. The first major dramatic feature is probably Going Down the Road, and that's 1967. Our guys went south.
Right, that's
it was so much closer. There was an established film industry to go contribute to.
Yes. You did do, though, talking of the spiritual ones, you did do Jesus of Montreal.
We did, which is
so
a great
you did
film.
do the kind of modern prophet.
Yeah.
I remember from the late 80s.
88, I think.
Yeah.
87. Yeah, that's Daniel Khan, though. He's a force unto himself.
Yeah, and then, of course, you've got the brilliant Villeneuve.
Who's working in the States now almost exclusively.
But then I think also did that thing that Audiard does, and I think Paul Greengrass probably did, taking an understanding of the real world and then applying it in American films.
That's true.
Yeah. Villeneuve's first, the one that, and Sendi's the first one I saw of his, which is just bold and brilliant in a not dissimilar way even. Yeah. I mean, structurally incredibly bold, but the titles and the, great storytelling, but very, very, very real and very believable.
Yeah. Have you seen the one just before that, Polytechnique?
No.
That's worth seeing if you can find it. It's it's a 75-minute black and white scope adaptation or impression of a very infamous school shooting in 1989 in Montreal.
Right.
Told from multiple perspectives. He does his thing to it, and it's absolutely gripping.
Really?
And I don't think it ever really got any legs internationally, but it's definitely worth seeing.
Oh, I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I'm sure I can find it for you.
Yeah.
But I did want to ask you, and we sort of touched on it already, is there anything of a prophet that's found its way into your own creative DNA? Have you borrowed or stolen or riffed on anything from it?
I think maybe in terms of, the truthfulness of the performances.
Mm-hmm.
Pushing everything to feel very real, very believable. I think actually, all my first films were with single camera, and then I, did bigger films and started using two cameras, and got really frustrated because it felt like it's not a single voice,
right.
And looked into a prophet and saw that they'd shot it all single camera, and I just thought, that's absolutely for me the way to go.
Yeah.
It's actually even quicker, I think, because you're not having to kind of balance two opposing things. You can be very singular in the way that you shoot something.
Mm-hmm.
I think his blocking is great, not to get too technical, but the way that he has long takes and they're often handheld, and the moves feel very unmotivated. That he never moving the camera for its own sake, and he just gets the actors to work around the camera, so it feels very organic, which feels like it's like it feels like he's been watching a lot of Spielberg films. He's like the master of blocking, how to do that kind of thing, and he's done it in his own way just to keep it all feeling very real and natural, and that's certainly something that I've kind of tried to work on. Certainly with Journey's End, how do you keep things going? What do you need to keep things takes running longer, and how do you work on the blocking so you're not necessarily worried about getting a reaction shot? You make people wait because that person's going to walk past the camera and go over there, and then you can see what they're thinking. So you don't have to have a cut in there. So I think he does that, but I think it's mostly it's the emboldening, really. It's being really particular, very bold, very good use of music, which I certainly think we tried to do with Journey's End, like really take to anti-score it, with long-held atmospheric score that's not trying to drive the plot. It's trying to give you a psychological insight.
Yeah, that's a thing that I've noticed, and obviously with the Zimmer score for Dunkirk, everybody was talking about the use of not music, of whatever the tone is, but it does feel like in the last few years, cinema about what am I trying to say? Cinema about conflict, about war. There's the conventional war score has sort of fallen away.
Yeah, I think there's been some there've been some fascinating and brilliant new scores, and his best work for me is always Jacques Audiard. The Beat That My Heart Skipped. You buy the soundtrack, it's just a 30-minute piece of music with a long held high note for a lot of it, and it's brilliant, and beautiful, and resolves itself obviously musically. But you look at the stuff that Villeneuve's had for Arrival, was it's a completely different type of score. So when we did Journey's End, I came across this Icelandic composer called Hilda Gudnadóttir, very bad pronunciation, and I licensed, rather than kind of get a score composed, I licensed all her material and just used it, letting it breathe as a bed underneath a lot of the images, and it was a kind of brilliant and liberating thing. I since found out that she had worked very closely with Johan Johansson, who did all the.
Well, he scored
Arrival score, yeah. So it's like it's part of that school.
Yeah, no, it's great that the influences aren't just so conformist anymore. That you can really try anything.
Yeah,
we've reached a point, I think, where audiences either have become so narrow for a given film, or so sophisticated that either way you can play to them and still tell your story.
Yeah, and it's probably it's a technology thing as well, isn't it? In the way that photography had to change when painting had to change when photography came along, and now film is changing, I think, or some kinds of films are forced to change because television's come along and it lives in a space where some film used to do, and film. The question is, does film have to do something different? What can it do that television can't do, frankly, and better, in more depth and more character over time, with the same kind of production and actors and scripts quality. And I think sometimes it's to create that whole experience.
Immersion.
The immersion.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, television, as soon as it went to 16:9, it was immediately cinematic.
Yes,
people said, "Oh, it's like you're watching movies." Well, kind of,
but
it's got act breaks, and it's got limitations on running time.
And then the VOD's got rid of ad breaks.
Yeah,
so you've got a straight hour of brilliant writing, brilliant acting. Yeah, so
it can compete, I think, but it's the novel versus the short story.
Yes,
I think, or the series,
or the novella. Yes, yeah.
And film still, the inherent limitations of television, the fact that you're going to be watching more of this.
Yes.
So many shows get second series that don't need them.
Yes.
The idea of
finality and
a film is over. It's a block of your time. It's the experience of sitting in the dark and being
and you
hypnotized.
Don't get that, I think, slightly uneasy feeling at the end of series now that you're going to be sold another one.
Yeah.
Which in the really good ones you don't feel. True Detective, you didn't feel that.
We certainly
felt like that's it.
Yeah.
You know, the why. You didn't feel that, but you know, a lot of the other ones you feel like, okay, I'm being kind of held out for this next thing.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, just answered a bit more of that question of what
Sure, yeah.
of what I took away from it. I think it's point of view as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's you know, what a prophet does is it puts you in that prison. You understand prison life by the end of it.
Yeah.
You know, or by 10 minutes in, frankly, you know, and you understand what it's like to be there in the claustrophobia, and then what it's like to break free, because he kind of holds that back from you. He's not doing establishing shots of the prison. You never see the prison.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, you never really see much of the infrastructure of the prison itself. Really, you see what he sees, and I definitely take that away. I certainly think that's something that I try and do, and have definitely tried to do since, and certainly tried to do in Journey's End, was really limit the point of view. You only ever see what in the trenches. You only ever see what the soldiers see.
Yeah.
You don't look out the top. And you only see that when they go on a raid. So it's just to keep that kind of intensity of the experience.
Yeah, and it's so much better for empathy. I mean, it's so much better to put us in their mindset. The characters their problems become our problems.
Yeah.
Like we only know what they know. I'm thinking of a film I saw recently it's supposed to be milking suspense out of whether characters see something or not.
Right.
And the structure of it just comes right out and tells us far too soon.
Right.
And
yeah.
It's self-defeating in a way. Or I mean, maybe that's the point of it.
No, it is. I think you know, some people are just, you know, are brilliant at that. I think Haneke is great. You know, if you withhold information, you know, it's about the giving out or withholding of information. If you give out information, a big piece of information at the start, that can be great. It's like a bomb under the bed, and everyone's just waiting for that to happen. Or just withholding stuff, so you get tension.
Mm-hmm. Well, cachet,
mystery.
Right? I mean, it's a film without release.
Yeah, absolutely.
You spend
every shot, just as he walks down a corridor, the creep of the tracking shot down, it's just full of tension. You know, you don't know anything. The mystery, and he holds it back and holds it back.
We're in the dark as much as his
he's brilliant. I mean, God, he's a master. I mean, I could have picked any one of his, to be honest.
Yeah.
But
well, this was a good one too.
Oh, it's great. No, it's great. I mean, this is the one that I guess spoke to me, maybe, you know, more. The one that I would, you know, I guess you'd say, like, you know, would there be a film that you wish you could possibly have made? And, you know, A Prophet would be that one. Yeah. You know, I would be happy to have made A Prophet and retire. You know,
it's a good goal.
Yeah.
My thanks to Saul Dibb, whose fine new drama Journey's End is in theaters now in Montreal and Toronto and expands across Canada this Friday, April 6th. Thanks also to Ali Lemaire. She knows what she did. And to Paul Atherley for once again letting me turn his flat into a podcast studio. Saul's not on Twitter, but you can keep an eye on his movie at Journey's End 2017, all one word, no apostrophe, and you can find A Prophet on Blu-ray and DVD from Sony Pictures Home Entertainment. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com. You can also find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, S-E-M-Cast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. If you feel like leaving a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, that would be greatly appreciated. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And thank you for your support, and thanks for listening.